Ladies and gentlemen, it's CU Spotlight. We've got a little Latin flair going on. We are at Cuba Libre GAC 2026. It's the Bits and Bytes podcast, everybody. I am your host, Jonathan Taylor, JT with Bank Social CUSO.
And I'm Senora Senn, also known
Senora
as
Senn.
Shirley, from Fireman's Federal Credit Union.
Thank you, Shirley. And man, we're kicking this thing off. Second year in a row. We've been doing this thing. So make sure we get all the sponsors in here. We've got Capstone Strategic, Pure IT, of course, NCU-ISAO, Defense Storm Connective, and of course, Bank Social. Shout out to everybody. And with us is, wouldn't you know it, two of those supporters right here. So go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Hey, I'm Brian Hinze. I'm President and CEO of NCU-ISAO.
And the next gentleman who we call the voice.
The voice, yes. So I'm Steve Koinm. I'm the CISO and a co-founder of Pure IT Credit Union Services.
Thank you guys for being here today. So we're scrambling because that's what one does at GAC, from one event to the next thing to the next thing to all the stuff. And it's Tuesday for the listeners. So some of us started on Saturday. And so but officially day two of the conference. So start with you, Brian. How have things been going for you guys here?
I love using this as an opportunity to connect with what's oftentimes for me a different set of stakeholders across the industry. So that's what makes this happy hour really special for us, because as you can imagine, if you know a little bit about NCU-ISAO, we're generally the CISOs, the InfoSec folks, VPs of IT, those types of people. And of course, they are represented here in some capacity, but to be able to connect with CEOs, CIOs, board of directors, and, help them understand what our mission is and who we are is always really, really valuable.
Mm-hmm. Same question, Steve.
Yeah, it's really good to be able to see a different, just like Brian was saying, the stakeholders that we see in the security space, we've got all those going on, but being able to go and see the other folks. Another function that I take care of and do within Pure IT is doing assessments. And so at that point, I'm actually dealing with the CEOs and other folks. So I'm seeing a different set of the same people I know. So it's really good to be able to reconnect with them. I reconnect all the time with the InfoSec people, but I don't always get to reconnect with the CEOs. So it's good to see those folks here today.
Well, this is definitely one of my favorite events, and I'm not just saying that. It really is true. It's always been a fun event. It's a great cross-section, I think, of CUSOs that lean towards IT, but, are fintech-based, along with forward-leaning, forward-thinking credit unions that are here to connect and to, collaborate and talk about what's next, what's in the future. For you guys right now, specific to what you do, what is top of mind? What is the tip of the spear, so to speak, that you're educating folks about or talking about right now? Start with you, Brian.
I think there's a couple things. We've seen what the NCUA's 2026 supervisory priorities entail, and now that those have been out since the end of January, we're starting to see some of those credit unions go through their exam cycles. So understanding what that's really meaning in practice when you talk about focusing on payments, security of payment systems, fraud mitigation and mitigating fraud losses, protecting members, right, protecting against insider threats. So I think that's really something that we're focused on to better understand the pulse of what this looks like in action, so that credit unions can understand, really what these examinations are going to look like this year. Is certainly part of it.
Great point.
Yeah, and for myself, I've just really had an uptick in boards wanting to become InfoSec aware, cyber aware. They're trying to get their own training and to be able to figure out how do we do this from the top down, right? If they're not involved, it's really hard to push that culture all the way through. And so I'm actually having boards reaching out at this point and going, we need our own advisors. We need somebody to help us understand what the management of the credit union is trying to tell us.
I think some of the things we've been hearing around GAC as well is, without going into politics, all the things that are going around the world in terms of the geo risk and things that are involving cyber fraud, things of that nature. regardless of the size of the credit union, these problems exist. So kind of what are the things that you are seeing and maybe some of the solutions?
Yeah, I mean, one of the realities is you can't really wait for a global conflict to be prepared to defend against cyber attacks, right?
Good point.
I mean, that is the reality. If we're trying to prepare now, it's a little bit too late. But what is important is to be able to tie events like what's going on in the world right now with the expected types of risks that you might see. So what we saw last year a little bit with one particular global conflict, and that is expected to be echoed in some capacity here, is going to be hacktivist attacks. These are like politically motivated hacking, where certain sides align with certain political views, and they may attack entities, that are against those particular views. So denial of service attacks, commonly against like public-facing, web applications. Websites are usually the most common thing that you might see out there. So being prepared to defend against those, I would say, is one particular item. The other is, destructive type of attacks and phishing attacks. Generally, we start to see those increase, and one of the things that probably is overlooked when we're doing our planning on an annual basis is making sure you're prepared for some of these dependent systems to be offline. We hope that doesn't happen, of course, but obviously credit unions and other critical infrastructure are going to be reliant on communications, the power grid, water, things like that. And if there's disruptions in those particular systems due to politically aligned hacking in any type of way, then you have to hopefully have a plan to continue operations to the best of your ability in the absence of those.
It's such an interesting point. I was just sitting down with a credit union that has the name of Langley, and he literally brought up in the meeting an hour ago that they're really ratcheting up because they're seeing a lot more attempts simply because people associate their name with, the political, environment, the military environment, like what's going on right now. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So I don't want to say credit unions with names that might be, attached to political whatever, beware. But it was an interesting point that I hadn't thought of, that they're seeing a lot more attempts, and it was an insane number that he was telling me. I mean, it was insanely high, and I'm thinking, my God, that is a tidal wave of attacks coming in. So how are you guys helping credit unions handle the scale of attempts and attacks these days to penetrate?
So one of the situations, right, we're being told, just going on with that, we're being told by CISA and other organizations, hey, there's this situation going on, you need to ratchet up your things, and it's like, where's up from here? We're already there. We're as high as we can go. So
hold your hand out. I'm here.
And like we don't have any further up to go. We should already be at that point where we're aware. But it is true. There's a lot of folks that are putting systems in place and then not spending the time actually monitoring those systems. So that's where we're seeing a lot more from a security analyst side happening right now. Somebody actually spending the time, taking the hours a day, an hour, 2 hours a day, and actually going through all of those log files, right? You said the folks at Langley were talking about having so many more attacks. They don't, if none of them are getting through, the systems don't necessarily alert, right? You need to go look at those things and see that it's ratcheted up, and then just kind of pay more attention and just trying to find where are those other pieces we can put in place technically. But it's still going to come down. Most of those breaches, right? What's the latest report? 93%, I think, of the breaches involve something from a human making a mistake. Right. It's still those things. So right now, I think the place what we do for preparedness of any further preparedness is not technology. It's actually how do we help our people a little at a time? How do we continue to build them, grow them, so that they are not the mistake that happens that causes a breach to occur?
Yeah, 100%. Personally, with Bank Social CUSO, I've only been here, months, not years, but part of, us keeping up with our SOC 2 Type 2 is training, right? Staff training. And so, I don't want to say having to. I mean, it's an important thing to do, and it's always a good refresher to do those trainings and kind of get the latest and greatest. Our company that we utilize is really fun because they hire actors like John Lovitz, who's like doing it, and he's like, oh no, it's a breach, and I'm like dying. But the message is really interesting. I'm curious, what are you seeing that's new that needs to be, I guess, educated out to employees of credit unions? What's the latest kind of trickiest, I don't want to say scam, but what have you seen that's been unfortunately working? Story of the Brian.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think those who've seen me speak recently know that I have been really advocating for resilience against deep fakes and primarily awareness of the risks of them, because they are becoming easier and easier to replicate. We're seeing more and more attempts. Gartner published a survey middle of last year. I didn't have the full survey, just the sample that they provided. And in that, they were discussing how something like 6 or 7% of businesses have had a major, within their surveyed group, have had a major event related to deep fakes and AI. So it's starting to really happen. What people were worried about is happening to scale in some regard. But the good news is, while it is very important to be aware of it, I would absolutely say, as we're seeing more and more of these, the good news is that AI and deepfakes are really looking to emulate human behavior. So you would defend against them in many ways, aside from the awareness that the vector exists, the same way you would against social engineering attacks, right? But what if a human tried to come in and socially engineer sensitive information from one of your employees? Well, if you're resilient to that and you have some controls in place like dual authorization, multi-factor, those kind of things, then I would also say that you're going to be better off against deepfakes as well.
Love that.
Right, and I was just pulling up a book that I'm actually reading at the moment. So a friend of mine back in Houston just wrote a book, Behavioral Insights in Cybersecurity. So he's trying to take the psychology of what's going on and actually figure out how is it that we're getting fooled, so that we can learn and train our brains not to be, right? When he says, you get this free because you're here today, just click this link, then that just, people are just like, ooh, it's free and I'm special because I'm here and I get to click a link. And they just don't think about the fact that, whoops, that was somebody that just totally engineered me socially to be able to do something by promising things that I want. And we have to learn those different things. And again, in the deep fakes side of things, right, we see all these ads for how, here, take a picture of your baby and click this AI thing and it animates your baby doing a dance, right? And so we can do that with people as well. So as we learn what are real type animations, what is real, what's not, we're going to have to learn better how to tell whether it's not something that's real, whether it is real. Again, in that deep fake side of things, it's going to be very interesting to build and grow our way through doing that. And I think we're just going to have to find little incremental changes, not do cybersecurity training once a year. We need to do little incremental changes constantly, measure what's happening, and be able to do little bits at a time to be able to get that. Trying to just feed it all to everybody in a fire hose doesn't get us there.
So, one of the things I hear a lot from the small to mid-sized credit unions is they almost seem to go overboard from the members' perspective on fraud in terms of mitigating it, to the point that it makes it very difficult for members to do business with the credit unions. What advice could you give to credit unions that are facing some of that, because it's turning members to other areas that are not in the credit union system?
Yeah, so for me, I think we have to get much more accurate about those systems. That's can be harder in that smaller credit union size where you can't afford all the tools that are there, but things that we're doing, things like the watch list that the NCU-ISAO is putting together now, where when fraud is found and discovered, the IP address that came from is going into a list, and now when you see something odd, you can check that against this IP address list and go, oh, well, that kind of has a correlation there, and know that you can raise that level of where that's at so that you can get more accurate about those. There are lots of the larger institutions, right? They seem to just be right on board for how it is things are fraudulent. They can detect it and do that a lot better. We just need to be able to do what we can when we can't afford all of the big tools that are there.
What are your thoughts on that, Brian?
I would also add to it that member education is really important. And I think everyone's working to educate their members, right? But as long as your members are working towards securing themselves and securing their access to their online banking systems and doing the right things and using complex passwords, and you're working to educate them, you're going to see the fraud losses dip down just naturally, at which point, maybe the relaxation of some of these additional controls where you're really trying to protect your member base from themselves and the attackers is going to be able to be backed off just a little bit, just because you are having a more successful relationship and cohabitation and things like online banking between the members and the organization.
Brian, thank you both, Brian and Steve. Thank you both for coming on. If something really resonated with the listeners and they wanted to learn more or reach out, ask a quick question, where would they go?
For us, it'd be NCU-ISAO.org, so that's NCU-ISAO.org. If you're somebody that likes to come to events like GAC, we actually put on a conference with Pure IT called CU Intersect. The CU Intersect conference has its own website, too.
You
That's
do?
CUintersect.com.
And I'm saying it like that because we did the podcast for that one, too. And what a blast. In such a great time. I mean, despite the weather, that was an amazing conference. You did a great job. Steve, same question to you.
So going to pureitqso.com will get you there. You can actually always send an email to CISO at pureitqso.com, and that actually gets to CISO Steve here.
Right
where
there.
Where I'd be happy to talk to you personally if that's what it is that we need to do.
All right, folks, thank you very much. Thank you, Shirley Senn,
you.
for being on this journey. And thank you, folks, for listening. I am Jonathan Taylor, JT, with Banks Social CUSO. And this is the Cuba Libre event, the Bits and Bytes at GAC 2026. Other sponsors, Capstone Strategic, Pure IT, NCU-ISAO, as we said, Banks Social, Defense Storm, and Connective. Folks, we will see you on the flip side.
Hasta la vista.
Baby.